The mining colony of Kepler 442b had never seen anything like Marcus Chen. At 17, he possessed an unusual gift that made the other colonists uncomfortable. While they struggled with the planet's unique electromagnetic fields that interfered with most technology, Marcus could sense the underlying patterns in the chaos. His mind seemed to resonate with frequencies that drove others to madness. The colony's chief administrator, Dr. Sarah Voss, had documented Marcus's abilities extensively. Unlike the other settlers who required neural dampeners to function on the planet's surface, Marcus thrived in the electromagnetic storms. He could predict solar flares hours before the colony's sensors detected them, and his presence somehow stabilized the mining equipment during the worst interference periods. Most disturbing to the adults was Marcus's habit of staring into the planet's crimson sky during the daily aurora displays. He claimed he could hear something calling from the void between stars, a melody that grew stronger each day. The colony psychologist dismissed it as adolescent imagination, but Marcus knew better. Something ancient and powerful was reaching out to him across the cosmic distances. The breakthrough came during the worst electromagnetic storm in the colony's history. While the adults huddled in the shielded underground bunkers, Marcus stood alone on the observation deck, his arms spread wide as crackling energy danced around him. The storm's intensity should have killed him instantly, but instead, it seemed to flow through him like water through a sieve. That night, as the aurora reached unprecedented brightness, Marcus heard the voice clearly for the first time. It spoke not in words but in pure emotion and imagery that flooded his consciousness. The entity called itself Zephyros, and it had been searching the galaxy for centuries, seeking a mind capable of true communion. Most species it encountered were too primitive or too rigid in their thinking patterns to achieve the necessary resonance. Humanity, however, possessed something unique. Their neuroplasticity combined with an innate rebellious streak made them ideal candidates for bonding with beings of cosmic consciousness. Marcus represented the next evolutionary step, a bridge between terrestrial life and the vast intelligences that dwelt in the spaces between worlds. The following morning brought visitors to the colony. 3 massive ships of unknown design dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls gleaming with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. The vessels belonged to the Hegemony, a collection of ancient races that had dominated this sector of the galaxy for millions of years. They had come to investigate the strange energy signatures emanating from the human settlement. Ambassador Kethvar of the Crystalline Dominion materialized in the colony's central hub, his form shifting between states of matter as he examined the primitive human facilities with obvious disdain. The Hegemony had cataloged thousands of species over the eons, and none had ever posed a threat to their carefully maintained order. Humans were listed as a Category 7 civilization, barely worthy of observation, let alone direct contact. The ambassador's dismissive attitude changed when he detected the residual energy patterns from the previous night's storm. The readings were impossible. No Category 7 species should be capable of channeling stellar-level forces. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Something on this backwater world had achieved resonance with energies that even the Hegemony's most advanced races approached with caution. Dr. Voss tried to maintain diplomatic protocol as she escorted the alien dignitary through the colony, but Kethvar showed little interest in human achievements. His attention focused entirely on the electromagnetic readings, which seemed to originate from a single point source. When his scanners traced the energy signature to Marcus's quarters, the ambassador's crystalline form flickered with what could only be described as surprise. Marcus felt the alien's presence before they met face to face. The Hegemony representative's mind touched his briefly, a cold probe seeking to categorize and dismiss, but Marcus pushed back, his consciousness expanding beyond the confines of his physical form. For a split second, he touched something vast and ancient dwelling in the space between stars, and that presence touched him in return. The meeting in the colony's briefing room was tense. Kethvar's usual condescending demeanor had been replaced by something approaching wariness. He questioned Marcus extensively about his abilities, clearly disturbed by responses that defied every model the Hegemony used to classify developing species. Humans were supposed to be predictable, limited by their short lifespans and primitive technology. Marcus represented an anomaly that threatened their fundamental understanding of galactic development. As the interrogation continued, Marcus began to sense something else. Beyond the ambassador's probing questions lay fear. The hegemony's power rested on their monopoly of advanced knowledge and technology. They maintained control by ensuring that younger species remained dependent on their guidance. A race capable of evolving beyond their classifications posed an existential threat to the established order. The revelation came when Marcus accidentally allowed his consciousness to expand during a moment of frustration. The connection he had established with Zephyros suddenly flared to life, and for an instant, the colony's conference room filled with the presence of something that existed on a scale beyond physical matter. The Star-Wyrm's consciousness touched every mind present, and in that moment of contact the truth became clear. The hegemony had not risen to power through natural evolution. They had achieved their dominance by destroying or suppressing every species that showed signs of transcending physical limitations. For millions of years, they had posed as benevolent guides while systematically eliminating any civilization that might challenge their authority. The galaxy was littered with the remnants of races that had come too close to achieving true cosmic awareness. Marcus staggered under the weight of this knowledge, but Zephyros's presence steadied him. The Star-Wyrm had witnessed the hegemony's crimes across countless worlds and had been searching for a species capable of standing against them. Humanity's unique combination of adaptability and defiance made them perfect candidates for the role. Through Marcus, the bond between human and cosmic entity would herald a new age of freedom for all the galaxy's oppressed peoples. Ambassador Kethvar's form blazed with hostile energy as he realized what had transpired. The human colony had become ground zero for a revolution that could topple an empire spanning half the galaxy. His hand moved toward a communication device that would summon a hegemony battle fleet, but Marcus was already reaching out with his newly expanded consciousness. The young human's mind touched the Star-Wyrm fully for the first time, and their bond ignited like a newborn star. Energy cascaded through the colony's systems, overloading Kethvar's equipment and sending a pulse across space that would be detected by every hegemony sensor array within 50 light-years. The message was clear and unmistakable. Humanity had found an ally among the cosmic forces, and the age of hegemony dominance was about to end. The energy pulse that erupted from Kepler 442b rippled across subspace like a stone thrown into still water. Within hours, every major hegemony monitoring station had detected the anomaly and traced its origin to the insignificant human mining colony. Emergency sessions convened on a dozen worlds as ancient beings struggled to comprehend what they had witnessed. On the crystal spires of Nexus Prime, the hegemony's capital world, High Archon Veltar received Ambassador Kethvar's fragmented transmission with growing alarm. The report spoke of impossible energies, of a primitive human somehow achieving resonance with forces that existed beyond the physical realm. Most disturbing was Kethvar's final message before his communication array overloaded. The human had made contact with something the hegemony had spent eons trying to forget. The Star-Wyrms were creatures of legend, being so ancient that they predated the formation of most galaxies. Hegemony archives contained only fragmentary references to these entities, recovered from the ruins of civilizations that had vanished before their empire's founding. According to those scattered records, the Star-Wyrms possessed consciousness on a cosmic scale, able to manipulate matter and energy across stellar distances. They were living embodiments of the universe's fundamental forces, and their awakening had historically preceded the fall of galactic empires. Back on Kepler 442b, Marcus struggled to maintain his sanity as Zephyros's vast consciousness settled into the neural pathways of his human brain. The Star-Wyrm's thoughts were like oceans trying to flow through streams, requiring constant adjustment and compression to avoid overwhelming its new partner. Memories spanning millions of years flooded Marcus's awareness. The birth and death of stars, the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and the endless patience required to exist on a cosmic timescale. Dr. Voss and her medical team worked frantically to monitor Marcus's condition as his body adapted to forces no human had ever experienced. His neural activity spiked beyond their instruments' ability to measure, yet somehow his vital signs remained stable. The electromagnetic fields that had always plagued the colony now swirled around him in complex patterns, as if responding to his emotional state. The most remarkable change was in Marcus's perception of reality itself. Where once he had seen empty space between planets, he now perceived vast networks of energy connecting every stellar body in intricate webs of force. The universe revealed itself as a living entity, with each star serving as a neuron in a cosmic mind of unimaginable scope. Through Zephyros's memories, he began to understand that consciousness was not limited to biological forms, but could exist at any scale where sufficient complexity emerged. Ambassador Kethvar, his crystalline form badly damaged by the energy discharge, demanded immediate evacuation from the human colony. His reports to the hegemony command structure painted Marcus as an existential threat that required immediate elimination. The precedent was clear. Any species showing signs of transcendence had to be destroyed before they could challenge the established order. The fact that this particular development involved a Star-Wyrm made the situation exponentially more dangerous. The colony's inhabitants found themselves caught between wonder and terror as Marcus demonstrated. His expanding abilities, with minimal effort, he could now stabilize the planet's chaotic electromagnetic fields, allowing their equipment to function with unprecedented efficiency. Mining operations that had previously required months of careful planning could be completed in days. Yet there was something unsettling about the casual ease with which he manipulated forces that had previously defined the limits of human technology. Marcus's transformation accelerated as his bond with Zephyros deepened. The Star-Wyrm's ancient wisdom merged with human creativity and adaptability, producing insights that neither could have achieved alone. Together they began to perceive the true structure of the galaxy, not the random collection of worlds that human science described, but a carefully managed preserve where younger species were allowed to develop only within strictly controlled parameters. The hegemony's dominance rested on a foundation of deliberate ignorance. They had spent millions of years ensuring that no species discovered the fundamental principles that governed cosmic consciousness. Technologies that could have lifted entire civilizations to transcendence were suppressed or destroyed. Promising individuals who showed signs of awakening were eliminated before they could share their insights. The galaxy had been transformed into a vast prison where only the hegemony's member races were permitted to achieve their full potential. Through Zephyros's memories, Marcus witnessed the destruction of dozens of civilizations that had come close to breaking free from these artificial constraints. The Vorthan collective had achieved limited telepathic unity before hegemony. Peacekeepers introduced a plague that targeted their neural networks. The singing crystals of Andromeda had learned to commune with stellar energies before their homeworld was destabilized by gravitational weapons. Each extinction had been carefully orchestrated to appear natural, maintaining the illusion that the hegemony were benevolent guardians rather than cosmic tyrants. As Marcus absorbed these revelations, his anger blazed across the electromagnetic spectrum, causing aurora displays visible from orbit. The Star-Wyrm's presence amplified his emotions, transforming righteous fury into forces that could reshape matter at the molecular level. For the first time in millions of years, Zephyros felt something approaching hope. Humanity's capacity for moral outrage, when combined with cosmic-level power, might finally provide the catalyst needed to shatter the hegemony's stranglehold on galactic development. The response from the hegemony came sooner than expected. A massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, their weapons already charging for bombardment. High Archon Veltar had decided that subtlety was no longer an option. The human colony would be sterilized from orbit, along with any evidence of Star-Wyrm involvement. Official records would list the incident as a tragic accident caused by stellar instability. Dr. Voss received the ultimatum with grim resignation. The hegemony demanded the immediate surrender of Marcus Chen for protective custody, along with all research data related to his abilities. Failure to comply would result in the colony's complete destruction within 6 standard hours. As she contemplated the impossible choice between sacrificing one young man or dooming 3,000 colonists, Marcus himself provided the answer. Standing in the colony's central plaza, Marcus raised his hands toward the crimson sky as his consciousness expanded beyond the confines of his physical form. Zephyros's power flowed through him like liquid starlight, and for the first time since their bonding, human and Star-Wyrm achieved perfect synchronization. The electromagnetic chaos that had plagued Kepler 442b suddenly resolved into perfect harmony, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. When Marcus spoke, His voice carried across every communication channel in the system, reaching the hegemony fleet with crystal clarity. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of cosmic authority. You will not harm these people. Your time of dominance is ending. The galaxy will be free. The message was accompanied by a demonstration of power that left no doubt about his sincerity. Every hegemony ship found its weapon systems disabled simultaneously, their energy conduits overloaded by forces their technology couldn't comprehend. In the stunned silence that followed, Marcus felt other presences stirring across the galaxy, hidden enclaves of survivors from extinct civilizations, protected by ancient Star-Wyrm guardians, began to emerge from concealment. The signal had been sent and received, the age of revolution had begun, and humanity would lead the charge against an empire that had oppressed the galaxy for far too long. High Archon, Feltar's furious commands echoed through his disabled flagship as he realized the magnitude of the threat they faced. This wasn't just a single human with unusual abilities. It was the beginning of a galactic uprising that could unravel everything the hegemony had built. Emergency protocols activated across their territory as they prepared for a war unlike any in their long history. The cosmos held its breath as two forces that had shaped galactic history for millions of years prepared for their final confrontation. On one side stood the hegemony, with their vast fleets and ancient technologies. On the other, a 17-year-old human boy bonded with a creature of living starlight, backed by the accumulated fury of every oppressed species in the galaxy. The outcome would determine whether the next age would bring freedom or an even darker tyranny. The disabled hegemony fleet hung motionless in space around Kepler 442b, their crews struggling to comprehend how their supposedly invincible technology had been neutralized by a single human. Admiral Corex of the Void Hunters, the hegemony's most feared military commander, stared at his darkened tactical displays with growing unease. In 3,000 years of conquest, he had never encountered resistance that could simply reach out and turn off his weapons with a thought. Emergency power flickered through the fleet as engineers worked desperately to restore primary systems. Their efforts proved futile. Whatever force Marcus and his Star-Wyrm companion had unleashed operated on principles that transcended conventional physics. Energy patterns flowed through the disabled ships like living things, actively preventing any attempt at weapons activation while leaving life support and basic systems untouched. On Kepler 442b, Marcus felt the weight of the galaxy's attention focusing on their small mining colony. Through Zephyros's cosmic awareness, he could sense other Star-Wyrms stirring from eons of dormancy. Drawn by the resonance of their bond, hidden throughout the galaxy, these ancient beings had waited patiently for a species capable of challenging the hegemony's stranglehold on galactic development. Humanity's arrival had provided the catalyst they needed. Dr. Voss watched in amazement as Marcus coordinated responses across distances that should have required hours of communication delay. His consciousness seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, touching minds on dozens of worlds where oppressed populations had detected the energy pulse from their bonding. The young man who had once struggled with basic electromagnetic interference now commanded forces that operated beyond the speed of light. The first of the hidden enclaves to reveal themselves was the Ashran Archive, a massive library ship that had wandered the galaxy's edge for over 1 million years. Its crew consisted of survivors from 17 different species that the hegemony had supposedly rendered extinct. They had preserved not only themselves but also detailed records of their civilization's achievements, waiting for the day when justice might finally be possible. Captain Threnx, last of the crystalline Zephyrite, transmitted his ship's coordinates directly to Marcus's enhanced consciousness. The archive contained technologies and knowledge that the hegemony had spent eons trying to erase. Faster-than-light communication that didn't rely on hyperspace, energy sources that could power entire star systems, and most importantly, the complete historical record of the hegemony's crimes against galactic civilization. Similar revelations cascaded across known space as more hidden groups emerged from concealment. The singing forests of Proxima had survived their world's destruction by encoding their consciousness into quantum resonance patterns. The Void Dancers had learned to exist as pure energy, maintaining their culture through electromagnetic transmissions between pulsars. Each group brought unique capabilities that the hegemony had tried to eliminate, creating a coalition of survivors with powers beyond conventional military understanding. Marcus served as the focal point for this unprecedented gathering of refugee civilizations. Through his bond with Zephyros, he could facilitate communication between species whose thought patterns were completely incompatible. The Star-Wyrm's cosmic perspective provided a universal translation matrix that allowed beings of energy to coordinate with crystalline intelligences and quantum entities. For the first time in millions of years, the hegemony faced organized opposition from forces they thought they had successfully suppressed. High Archon Veltar's response was swift and brutal. If conventional weapons couldn't penetrate whatever protection surrounded the human colony, then more extreme measures would be necessary. Deep within the hegemony's most secret archives lay weapons that predated their empire. Artifacts recovered from civilizations so ancient that their origins were lost to time. These devices operated on principles that the hegemony's greatest scientists barely understood, but their destructive potential was beyond question. The entropy cascader emerged from its containment facility on Nexus Prime, a twisted mass of dark matter and exotic particles that existed in a state of controlled collapse. When deployed, it would create an expanding zone of universal decay that would reduce everything within a light-year radius to its component atoms. The weapon was supposed to be used only as a last resort against cosmic-level threats, but Veltar had decided that the Star-Wyrm bonding qualified as exactly such an emergency. Meanwhile, Admiral Corex received new orders that filled him with professional excitement and personal dread. His fleet was to withdraw to minimum safe distance while the Cascader reduced the entire Kepler 442 system to stellar debris. No evidence of human Star-Wyrm cooperation could be allowed to survive, even if it meant sacrificing every hegemony citizen currently in the area. The Empire's survival took precedence over individual lives, regardless of rank or species affiliation. As the hegemony fleet began its withdrawal, Marcus felt a chill of premonition flow through his enhanced senses. Zephyros's ancient memories contained fragments of knowledge about weapons that could unravel reality itself, devices so dangerous that even cosmic entities approached them with caution. The Star-Wyrm's alarm transmitted itself through their bond, warning Marcus that their enemies were preparing to deploy, forces that could destroy everything they sought to protect. The evacuation of Kepler 442b began immediately as Marcus's newfound allies moved to assist the human colonists. The Ashran Archive's massive cargo bays could accommodate the entire population, while smaller refugee ships provided escort and technical support. Dr. Voss coordinated the emergency procedures with remarkable efficiency, though she couldn't help but wonder if they were simply postponing an inevitable defeat. Marcus himself refused to leave the planet's surface, despite increasingly urgent pleas from both human and alien allies. His connection to Zephyros had reached a critical phase where physical separation from the bonding site might prove fatal to both participants. More importantly, he could sense that the approaching weapon represented a test that would determine whether their alliance was strong enough to challenge the hegemony's technological superiority. The entropy cascader arrived in the Kepler 442 system aboard a massive dreadnought that dwarfed even the largest hegemony battleships. Its deployment required precise positioning and extensive safety protocols, as the weapon's destructive field could potentially expand beyond its intended target area. Admiral Corex supervised the preparations with growing unease, aware that they were about to unleash forces that had been contained since the galaxy's youth. As the weapon powered up, reality itself began to fluctuate around its containment field. Space twisted into impossible geometries while time flowed in stuttering pulses that made coherent thought difficult. The Cascader's targeting systems locked onto Kepler 442b's electromagnetic signature, preparing to unleash entropy on a scale that would serve as a warning to any other species contemplating rebellion against hegemony. Authority. Marcus felt the approaching wave of destruction through every fiber of his being as his enhanced consciousness detected the weapon's malevolent presence. The device was more than just a tool of war. It was an embodiment of the hegemony's fundamental philosophy that order must be imposed through absolute destruction of anything that threatened their control. For the first time since his bonding with Zephyros, Marcus experienced genuine fear as he contemplated forces that could potentially overcome even Star-Wyrm capabilities. Yet, Within that fear lay the seed of human defiance that had always defined his species' greatest achievements. Humanity had never been the strongest or most technologically advanced race in the galaxy, but they possessed a stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried them from a single world to the stars themselves. As the entropy cascader reached full power, Marcus drew upon that indomitable spirit and merged it with Zephyros's cosmic wisdom. The resulting fusion created something unprecedented in galactic history, a consciousness that combined human creativity with cosmic perspective, mortal urgency with immortal patience, and, most importantly, the burning desire for justice that had driven both species to risk everything in their battle against tyranny. When the Cascader's destructive field finally lanced toward Kepler 442b, it encountered not a helpless target but a force of pure will backed by the power to reshape reality itself. The collision between entropy and determination sent shockwaves across multiple dimensions as two incompatible forces of nature fought for dominance over the laws of physics. The outcome would echo through cosmic history, determining whether the galaxy's future belonged to those who sought to preserve ancient orders through destruction, or those willing to forge new possibilities through the power of cooperation and hope. The moment the entropy cascader's destructive field touched the protective barrier surrounding Kepler 442b, reality convulsed like a wounded animal. Space itself cracked along stress lines that shouldn't have existed, while time fragmented into crystalline shards that reflected possible futures. The weapon's dark energy met the combined will of Marcus and Zephyros in a collision that sent ripples through dimensions beyond normal perception. Admiral Orcs watched his instruments register impossible readings as the cascader's supposedly unstoppable force encountered unprecedented resistance. The weapon had been designed to unravel the fundamental bonds holding matter together, reducing entire star systems to primordial chaos. Instead, it was being held in check by what appeared to be pure conscious intention backed by cosmic-level power. His most experienced tactical officers stared at their displays in stunned silence, unable to process readings that violated every known law of physics. On Kepler 442b's surface, Marcus felt the weapon's entropic hunger pressing against his consciousness like acid, trying to dissolve steel. The cascader wasn't just attacking physical matter, it was attempting to unravel the conceptual framework that allowed organized existence itself. Every thought, every memory, every dream of freedom that had motivated his rebellion was under assault from forces that sought to reduce all complexity to meaningless static. Through their bond, Zephyros shared memories of the weapon's previous deployment eons ago. The Star-Wyrms had encountered entropy cascaders during the First Galactic War, when younger cosmic entities had challenged the established order through brute force rather than wisdom. The weapons had succeeded in destroying several Star-Wyrm collectives, teaching the survivors that some battles required more than raw power to win. The key lay not in opposing the weapon's destructive force directly, but in redirecting its energy toward targets that could actually benefit from controlled entropy. Zephyros guided Marcus's consciousness through techniques that had been developed over millions of years, showing him how to transform the cascader's chaotic output into fuel for creation rather than destruction. It was the ultimate expression of the principle that had allowed Star-Wyrms to survive since the universe's youth, turning opposition into opportunity. Marcus's human heritage provided the missing element that had eluded previous attempts to neutralize cascader weapons. Where other species had tried to contain or redirect the entropic forces through careful manipulation, humanity's instinctive creativity suggested a radically different approach. Instead of fighting the weapon's destructive nature, Marcus began incorporating it into a larger pattern that would transform the entire Kepler 442 system into something unprecedented. The process required him to expand his consciousness beyond anything he had previously attempted. With Zephyros as his guide, Marcus extended his awareness to encompass every asteroid, comet, and particle of cosmic dust within the star system. The cascader's entropic field became a tool for reshaping matter at the quantum level, breaking down unnecessary complexity while preserving the essential patterns needed for life and growth. What emerged from this cosmic restructuring defied every classification system the hegemony had developed over millions of years. Kepler 442b, transformed from a mining colony struggling against hostile electromagnetic fields into a paradise world where the planet's energy patterns supported rather than hindered technological development. The system's asteroid belt reformed into a series of space habitats that could support billions of inhabitants, while the central star's output was optimized to provide perfect conditions for both biological and artificial life forms. The transformation sent shockwaves of possibility across the galaxy as other oppressed populations witnessed what could be achieved when cosmic-level power was applied to the benefit of ordinary beings rather than their destruction. Hidden enclaves that had cowered in fear for millions of years suddenly found courage to emerge from concealment. The hegemony's fundamental premise that advanced technology must be monopolized by ancient elites to prevent chaos had been decisively refuted by a human teenager who had chosen cooperation over domination. High Archon. Veltar's reaction to the Cascader's failure bordered on panic. Emergency sessions convened across hegemony space as their leadership grappled with the implications of losing their ultimate deterrent weapon. If entropy cascaders could be neutralized and even turned against their intended purpose, then no world under hegemony control could be considered secure. The careful balance of power that had preserved their empire for eons was beginning to collapse. More troubling was the cascade effect Marcus's actions had triggered throughout known space. On worlds where the hegemony had installed oppressive governors, populations were rising in coordinated rebellion. Their communications networks, previously isolated and monitored, were suddenly linking up through unknown channels that bypassed all conventional monitoring systems. Somehow, the human's bond with his Star-Wyrm companion had created a galactic consciousness network that was awakening suppressed civilizations everywhere. The hegemony's response was swift and merciless. If they couldn't eliminate the source of the rebellion through superweapons, they would resort to their oldest strategy: divide and conquer through systematic terror. Battle fleets deployed to dozens of worlds simultaneously, targeting population centers with conventional weapons designed to maximize suffering rather than military effectiveness. The message was clear: resistance would be met with genocide on a scale that would make survival seem preferable to freedom. Marcus felt each atrocity through his expanded consciousness as if the victims were his own family. The weight of responsibility threatened to crush his human psyche, as he realized that his actions had painted targets on innocent populations across the galaxy. Zephyros offered what comfort cosmic wisdom could provide, but even the Star-Wyrm struggled with the moral complexity of a situation where victory might require accepting casualties on an unimaginable scale. The solution came from an unexpected source. Captain Threnx of the Ashran Archive transmitted detailed schematics for technologies that the extinct civilizations had developed during their own struggles against hegemony oppression. Hidden within seemingly innocent cultural artifacts were defensive systems capable of protecting entire worlds from orbital bombardment. The key was distributing these technologies before the hegemony fleets could complete their punitive missions. Marcus found himself coordinating the greatest emergency relief operation in galactic history. Through his bond with Zephyros, he could instantaneously communicate with resistance cells on hundreds of worlds, providing them with technical specifications that could be adapted to local resources and conditions. Planets that had been helpless against hegemony aggression suddenly sprouted defensive networks that could turn aside even the most advanced assault weapons. The transformation wasn't limited to military capabilities. The same technologies that provided protection from space-based attacks also revolutionized planetary infrastructure. Worlds that had struggled with resource scarcity found themselves able to synthesize any material they needed from raw stellar energy. Populations that had been kept at subsistence levels to prevent rebellion suddenly had access to abundance that made hegemony promises of prosperity seem laughably inadequate. Within weeks, the galactic balance of power had shifted so dramatically that hegemony forces found themselves outnumbered and outgunned on dozens of fronts simultaneously. The empire that had dominated known space for millions of years was suddenly fighting for its survival against species they had considered beneath notice. Ancient defensive pacts activated as long-suppressed civilizations remembered their obligation to assist each other against common enemies. Admiral Korix's final transmission from the Kepler 442 system carried a note of grudging respect along with his tactical assessment. His fleet had been effectively neutralized by a force that seemed to operate beyond conventional military understanding. The human Marcus Chen and his Star-Wyrm ally had achieved something that the hegemony's greatest strategists had considered impossible. They had weaponized hope itself, turning it into a force capable of reshaping galactic civilization. As hegemony control crumbled across their territory, refugees from the extinct civilizations began returning to their ancestral worlds. Planets that had been barren for millions of years bloomed with new life as their original ecosystems were restored through technologies that treated matter and energy as expressions of consciousness rather than mere resources to be exploited. The galaxy was awakening from a nightmare that had lasted since before human civilization began. Yet even as victory seemed within reach, Marcus sensed that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The hegemony's leadership was retreating to their most secure installations, preparing weapons and strategies that had been held in reserve since their empire's founding. The final battle would require not just cosmic power, but the wisdom to use it responsibly, ensuring that the new age of freedom didn't simply replace one form of tyranny with another. The hegemony's final stronghold lay hidden within the galactic core, where the intense gravitational forces and radiation from the central black hole had long made exploration impossible for most species. Nexus Prime's true location had been concealed for millions of years, protected by natural barriers that even advanced civilizations couldn't overcome. Only the hegemony's most ancient technologies allowed them to maintain a stable installation in such a hostile environment. High Archon Veltar stood before the Eternal Conclave, a gathering of the hegemony's founding members who had entered artificial stasis eons ago to preserve their wisdom for critical moments. These beings predated most galactic civilizations, having achieved their current forms when the universe itself was young. Their awakening signaled that the Empire faced an existential crisis requiring solutions beyond conventional military strategy. The Conclave's first words chilled even Veltar's ancient soul. They spoke of contingencies that had been prepared when the hegemony first rose to power, weapons so terrible that their use would transform the galaxy into something unrecognizable. The Omega Protocol had been designed as the ultimate failsafe. If their empire could not be preserved, then galactic civilization itself would be reset to its earliest developmental stage. Marcus felt the stirring of these ancient powers through his bond with Zephyros, a darkness that pressed against the edges of cosmic consciousness like a cancerous growth. The Star-Wyrm's memories contained fragments of knowledge about the time before the hegemony's rise, when competing cosmic entities had waged wars that reshaped reality itself. The Omega Protocol represented the last remnant of those primordial conflicts, a doomsday weapon that could unravel the fundamental forces holding the galaxy together. Across known space, the rebellion's momentum continued to build as more worlds threw off hegemony control. The refugee civilizations had proven remarkably effective at coordinating resistance efforts, their diverse capabilities providing solutions to problems that had seemed insurmountable. The Singing Forest established communication networks that operated through quantum harmonics, allowing instantaneous coordination across galactic distances. The Void Dancers provided energy manipulation techniques that could power entire fleets without conventional fuel sources. Yet for all their newfound strength, the Allied forces faced a critical limitation. Their technologies were primarily defensive, designed to protect and preserve rather than destroy. The hegemony's final redoubt lay beyond the reach of conventional assault, protected by gravitational anomalies that would tear apart any approaching fleet. Even Star-Wyrm consciousness had difficulty penetrating the chaotic space-time distortions surrounding the galactic core. Dr. Sarah Voss, now serving as humanity's primary liaison with the refugee civilizations, coordinated research efforts from her new base aboard the Ashran Archive. The massive library ship had become the rebellion's de facto capital, its vast databases containing knowledge from dozens of extinct civilizations. Yet even with all this accumulated wisdom, the problem of reaching Nexus Prime seemed insurmountable through conventional means. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Among the human colonists evacuated from Kepler 442b was a young girl named Elena Vasquez, whose developing psychic abilities had been overshadowed by Marcus's dramatic transformation. Unlike Marcus's bond with cosmic forces, Elena's gift was more subtle. She could perceive the quantum probability threads that connected all possible futures. Through her enhanced perception, She detected a narrow window of opportunity that would allow access to the galactic core. The solution required a level of coordination that had never been attempted in galactic history. Every allied world would need to simultaneously channel their defensive energies into a single massive undertaking, the creation of a stable corridor through the space-time distortions protecting Nexus Prime. The effort would leave them temporarily vulnerable to hegemony counterattacks, but it represented their only chance to prevent. The Omega Protocol's activation, Marcus felt the weight of billions of hopes and fears pressing against his consciousness as he prepared to coordinate the unprecedented effort. Through Zephyros's cosmic awareness, he could sense the delicate balance required to maintain stability across such vast distances. A single miscalculation could result in gravitational cascades that would destroy entire star systems, yet failure to act would guarantee the galaxy's complete destruction. The hegemony detected the massive energy buildup as allied worlds began channeling power toward the galactic core. Emergency protocols activated across their remaining territories as Admiral Orcs, now commanding their last mobile fleet, attempted to disrupt the coordination effort. His attacks met fierce resistance from newly awakened defense networks, but each assault drained resources that the Allies desperately needed for their primary mission. Elena's probability sight guided the complex timing required to weave defensive energies from hundreds of worlds into a coherent pattern. Her young mind processed quantum calculations that would have overwhelmed even advanced AI systems, translating cosmic mathematics into intuitive insights that Marcus could implement through his Star-Wyrm bond. The collaboration between human creativity and cosmic power reached new heights as they prepared to challenge forces that had shaped galactic history. The moment of activation sent shockwaves through multiple dimensions as reality bent around the Allies' coordinated will. Space-time twisted into impossible geometries as a stable corridor formed through the chaotic energy surrounding the galactic core. The passage would remain open for only minutes, requiring perfect timing for the assault force to reach Nexus Prime before the distortions collapsed. Marcus led the attack personally, his consciousness extending across the strike force of refugee ships and awakened volunteers. Each vessel had been modified with technologies that allowed them to survive the intense radiation and gravitational stresses of the galactic core. Yet even with these protections, the journey through the corridor tested the limits of what biological and artificial life could. Endured Nexus Prime revealed itself as a structure that defied conventional understanding of architecture and engineering. The hegemony's capital existed partially outside normal spacetime, its crystalline spires extending into dimensions where thought and reality intersected. Ancient defensive systems awakened as the assault force approached, weapons that operated on principles predating most physical laws. The battle for the galactic core began as cosmic forces clashed in ways that had not been seen since the universe's youth. Hegemony defenders wielded technologies that could manipulate fundamental constants, while the Allied forces countered with the combined wisdom of extinct civilizations and the raw determination of species fighting for their freedom. Reality itself became a battlefield as competing visions of galactic order struggled for dominance. High Archon Veltar watched the assault unfold from the Eternal Conclave's chamber, his ancient features reflecting the grim satisfaction of finally facing worthy opponents. The rebellion had proven itself capable of achievements that the hegemony had thought impossible, but their greatest test still lay ahead. The Omega Protocol's activation sequence had already begun, and nothing short of divine intervention could prevent the galaxy's return to primordial chaos. Yet even as defeat seemed inevitable, Marcus felt a surge of familiar energy flowing through their bond. Zephyros was not alone. Other Star-Wyrms were awakening across the galaxy, drawn by the resonance of their cosmic confrontation. For the first time in eons, these ancient beings were choosing to act directly in galactic affairs, abandoning their traditional role as passive observers. The intervention of cosmic consciousness on such a scale would tip the balance of power in ways that neither side had anticipated. The true battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin, with forces that had shaped reality since the dawn of time, finally choosing sides in a conflict that would determine whether the cosmos would be ruled by fear or guided by hope. Marcus steeled himself for the ultimate test of human will against cosmic tyranny, knowing that the outcome would echo through eternity. The awakening of the Star-Wyrm sent ripples through dimensions beyond normal perception, as ancient consciousnesses that had slumbered for millions of years stirred to action. Marcus felt their presence like distant stars suddenly blazing to life, each one a vast intelligence that had witnessed the birth and death of countless civilizations. Through his bond with Zephyros, he could sense their collective decision to abandon eons of neutrality and directly intervene in galactic affairs. Nexus Prime's defenses faltered as cosmic forces beyond hegemony understanding began to manifest within their supposedly impregnable stronghold. The crystalline spires that had stood for millions of years started to resonate with harmonics that existed outside normal spacetime, their perfect geometries warping under the pressure of awakening Star-Wyrm consciousness. Ancient protective systems designed to repel conventional attacks proved useless against entities that could manipulate the fundamental structure of reality. High Archon Veltar felt the first stirrings of genuine fear as his sensors detected impossible energy readings throughout the galactic core. The Omega Protocol's activation sequence was proceeding according to plan, but the presence of multiple Star-Wyrms threatened to disrupt the careful calculations required for controlled galactic destruction. If the Doomsday weapon malfunctioned due to cosmic interference, it might create a cascade reaction that would unravel reality itself, rather than simply resetting galactic civilization. The Eternal Conclave's ancient members emerged from their stasis chambers with expressions of grim determination. These beings had survived the original cosmic wars that preceded the hegemony's rise, and they recognized the patterns of force that indicated a fundamental shift in the universe's power structure. Their empire had been built on the assumption that Star-Wyrms would remain passive observers, but that assumption was proving catastrophically incorrect. Marcus pushed deeper into Nexus Prime's twisted architecture, his enhanced consciousness guiding the assault force through corridors that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Each step forward required them to navigate not only physical space but also probability streams and temporal anomalies that could scatter their atoms across the timeline. The human volunteers who had joined the assault struggled to maintain their sanity, as they experienced reality from cosmic perspectives that their minds were never designed to process. Elena Vasquez remained aboard the Ashran Archive, her probability sight focused on the critical decision points that would determine the mission's outcome. Through her enhanced perception, she could see the branching paths of potential futures spreading out like a vast tree, most of them ending in galactic destruction. The few scenarios that offered hope required split-second timing and perfect coordination between forces operating on scales from quantum to cosmic. The first Star-Wyrm to manifest physically within Nexus Prime was Stellarian, an entity so ancient that its memories predated the formation of the local galactic cluster. Its appearance caused reality to fracture around it as space-time struggled to contain consciousness operating on a stellar scale. Hegemony defenders found their weapons useless against a being that existed as living starlight, their energy attacks merely feeding the cosmic entity's power. Zephyros felt a surge of joy through its bond with Marcus as it sensed its ancient companion's presence. The two Star-Wyrms had not communicated directly for millions of years, having pursued different approaches to protecting galactic civilization from cosmic threats. Stellarian had chosen the path of intervention, actively shaping the development of younger species, while Zephyros had preferred observation and indirect guidance. Their reunion marked the end of a philosophical divide that had prevented coordinated action for eons. The Omega Protocol's chamber lay at Nexus Prime's heart, protected by layers of temporal displacement that made it exist several microseconds ahead of normal time. This chronological barrier had been designed to prevent any possible interference with the weapon's activation sequence, but it proved inadequate against beings whose consciousness operated beyond linear temporal flow. Marcus felt Stellarian's ancient wisdom guiding him through the temporal maze as they approached the device that threatened all galactic life. The weapon itself defied easy description, existing as a convergence point where multiple dimensions intersected in carefully balanced opposition. Hegemony technicians had spent millions of years fine-tuning the device's parameters, ensuring that its activation would unravel galactic civilization without destroying the underlying structure of space-time itself. The calculations involved were so complex that they required the processing power of entire worlds working in parallel. Admiral Corex made his final stand in the protocol chamber, his body enhanced with technologies that allowed him to fight on equal terms with cosmic entities. The veteran warrior had accepted that the hegemony's defeat was inevitable, but he remained determined to ensure that their enemies would not inherit a galaxy worth ruling. His last loyal troops fought with desperate courage against forces they could barely comprehend, buying precious seconds for the Omega Protocol's completion. Marcus felt the weight of countless lives pressing against his consciousness as he faced the device that could end everything he had fought to protect. The protocol's activation sequence had progressed beyond the point where conventional intervention was possible, but Star-Wyrm consciousness operated on principles that transcended normal causality. Through his bond with Zephyros and the presence of Stellarian, he began to perceive possibilities that existed outside the weapon's programmed parameters. The solution required a level of sacrifice that would have been unthinkable before his transformation. Instead of trying to prevent the protocol's activation, Marcus chose to redirect its enormous energies toward a different purpose entirely. The device's power to unravel galactic civilization could be transformed into the force needed to restructure the galaxy according to principles of cooperation rather than domination. Elena's probability sight showed her the exact moment when intervention would be possible. A quantum instant when the protocol's energies would be vulnerable to redirection. Her guidance flowed through the Star-Wyrm communication network to Marcus, providing him with the precise timing needed to attempt the most audacious act of cosmic engineering in galactic history. The moment of contact between human will and universal forces sent shockwaves through every dimension of existence as Marcus merged his consciousness with the Omega Protocol itself. Instead of destroying galactic civilization, the weapon's energies began restructuring the fundamental laws that governed interstellar society. Worlds that had been isolated by distance and incompatible biology suddenly found themselves connected through networks of consciousness that transcended physical limitations. High Archon Veltar's scream of rage echoed through Nexus Prime as he watched millions of years of careful planning crumble before the combined assault of human determination and cosmic wisdom. The hegemony's greatest weapon had been turned against everything they represented, transforming their empire of fear into the foundation for a galactic community based on mutual understanding and cooperation. The transformation was not without cost. Marcus felt his human consciousness stretching to its breaking point as he tried to process information flows that operated on cosmic scales. Only Zephyros's presence and the support of awakening Star-Wyrms throughout the galaxy prevented his mind from being completely overwhelmed by the forces he was attempting to direct. As the Omega Protocol's energies completed their restructuring of galactic civilization, a new age began to dawn across known space. The artificial barriers that had separated species for millions of years dissolved as consciousness networks linked every inhabited world in a web of understanding that transcended language and biology. For the first time since the universe's youth, galactic civilization had the opportunity to develop according to its full potential, rather than the limited parameters imposed by ancient tyrants. Yet even as victory seemed complete, Marcus sensed that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The restructured galaxy would need guidance to prevent the freedom they had won from descending into chaos, and the responsibility for providing that guidance would fall upon those who had proven themselves capable of wielding cosmic power responsibly. The age of human leadership in galactic affairs was about to begin. 1 year after the fall of the hegemony, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, a massive diplomatic complex that orbited the galactic core where Nexus Prime had once cast its shadow. The twisted spires of the ancient stronghold had been replaced by crystalline gardens where representatives from thousands of species worked together to forge the foundations of a truly free galactic civilization. The transformation had not been without its challenges. Worlds that had been oppressed for millions of years struggled to adapt to sudden freedom, while others grappled with the responsibility of self-governance after eons of authoritarian rule. The consciousness networks that connected all inhabited systems helped facilitate understanding between incompatible species. But they could not eliminate the deep-seated fears and prejudices that had been cultivated over countless generations. Marcus himself had changed profoundly during the year of reconstruction. His bond with Zephyros had evolved from a desperate alliance into a true symbiosis, their combined consciousness serving as a bridge between human intuition and cosmic wisdom. No longer the uncertain teenager who had first heard the Star-Wyrm's call, he had become something unprecedented, a being capable of thinking on galactic scales while retaining the essential humanity that made such perspectives bearable. Dr. Sarah Voss approached him with the latest reports from the Integration Council, the governing body that had emerged from the alliance of refugee civilizations and newly liberated worlds. Her role had evolved from colonial administrator to one of the galaxy's foremost experts on interspecies cooperation, but she still carried herself with the practical efficiency that had made her indispensable during the rebellion's darkest hours. The reports painted a picture of unprecedented progress mixed with inevitable growing pains. The Singing Forests had successfully established communication protocols that allowed even the most alien consciousness patterns to achieve basic understanding. The Void Dancers had developed energy distribution networks that eliminated resource scarcity on most member worlds. Yet tensions remained between species whose evolutionary paths had led them to fundamentally different approaches to existence. Elena Vasquez materialized beside them through the probability-shifting teleportation system she had developed, her young face bearing the weight of responsibilities that would have crushed most adults. Her ability to perceive quantum futures had made her invaluable during the Reconstruction period, helping to identify potential conflicts before they could escalate into violence. At 14, she had become one of the galaxy's most trusted advisors on temporal strategy. The greatest challenge facing the new galactic community was not external threats but internal disagreements about the proper use of the technologies they had inherited from extinct civilizations. Some species advocated for rapid technological advancement that would lift all worlds to post-scarcity abundance within decades. Others argued for careful, gradual development that would preserve cultural diversity and prevent the homogenization that had characterized hegemony rule. Marcus found himself constantly mediating between these competing visions, his unique perspective allowing him to understand both the cosmic patience of ancient species and the urgent drives of younger civilizations. Through the Star-Wyrm communication network, he could experience the concerns of entities that measured time in geological epochs while simultaneously feeling the impatience of beings whose entire species history spanned mere millennia. The former hegemony territories presented the most complex reconstruction challenges. Worlds that had served as administrative centers struggled to find new purposes after their oppressive bureaucracies were dismantled. Military installations that had enforced tyranny for eons required complete restructuring to serve defensive rather than aggressive purposes. Most difficult of all were the populations who had genuinely believed in the hegemony's propaganda about the necessity of authoritarian control. Admiral Orcs, surprisingly, had become one of the most effective advocates for peaceful transition among former hegemony loyalists. His experience during the final battle had convinced him that the new order represented genuine progress rather than mere conquest. His warrior's perspective proved invaluable in helping military personnel adapt to roles as protectors rather than oppressors. Though many of his former colleagues viewed his conversion with suspicion, the Star-Wyrms themselves had taken on active roles in galactic governance for the first time in cosmic history. Stellarian served as an advisor to the Integration Council, its ancient wisdom helping to resolve disputes that might otherwise have led to war. Other awakened entities had accepted responsibility for specific sectors of space, providing guidance and protection to developing civilizations while carefully avoiding the paternalistic control that had characterized hegemony rule. Zephyros had chosen a different path, working directly with human colonies to help them adapt to their new role as mediators between cosmic and terrestrial consciousness. The Star-Wyrm's presence had accelerated human psychic development to an unprecedented degree, with thousands of individuals displaying abilities similar to Marcus and Elena's gifts. This rapid evolution raised questions about humanity's future that even cosmic wisdom found difficult to answer. The anniversary celebration brought together representatives from across the galaxy to commemorate their liberation and plan for the future. Species that had been extinct for millions of years stood alongside civilizations that had never known anything but freedom, united by their shared commitment to preventing the return of galactic tyranny. The diversity of forms and consciousness patterns represented in the Great Assembly Hall would have been impossible under the hegemony's rigid hierarchy. Marcus delivered the keynote address not through words but through direct consciousness sharing, allowing every being present to experience the emotional journey from oppression to liberation through his memories. The technique had been developed specifically for such occasions, providing a level of communication that transcended language barriers and cultural differences. For a few minutes, thousands of vastly different minds shared a common understanding of what their victory had truly meant. The speech concluded with a challenge that had emerged from the collective wisdom of the Integration Council. The new galactic civilization possessed technologies and capabilities that surpassed anything in recorded history. But power without purpose led inevitably to stagnation or corruption. They needed a mission that would unite all member species in common cause while respecting their individual nature and autonomy. Elena's probability site had identified the answer in potential futures that extended far beyond the local galaxy. The universe contained other regions where cosmic tyrannies similar to the hegemony continued to oppress developing civilizations. The techniques they had developed for liberation and reconstruction could be applied on an even larger scale, bringing freedom to species that had never known it was possible. The proposal sparked intense debate throughout the galactic community. Some argued that they had not yet achieved sufficient stability to consider external expansion, while others worried about becoming the very kind of cosmic hegemon they had fought to overthrow. The Star-Wyrms themselves were divided, with some supporting cautious exploration while others advocated for active intervention in oppressed regions. Marcus found himself at the center of these debates, his unique position as a bridge between human and cosmic consciousness, making his opinion crucial to the final decision. Through long conversations with Zephyros and the other awakened entities, he began to understand that their choice would determine not just the galaxy's future but the fundamental nature of consciousness evolution throughout the universe. The decision ultimately came down to a principle that had guided them throughout their struggle against the hegemony: the right of all conscious beings to determine their own destiny. If other regions of the universe were suffering under similar tyrannies, then they had an obligation to offer assistance while carefully avoiding the imposition of their own values and systems. The Great Expedition was formally announced during the celebration's closing ceremony, with Marcus and Elena accepting joint leadership of the advance exploration teams. Their mission would be to identify oppressed civilizations and offer them the tools and knowledge needed to achieve their own liberation. It was a responsibility that would require all the wisdom they had gained during their own struggle for freedom. As the anniversary celebration concluded and representatives began returning to their home worlds, Marcus stood once again on the observation deck, contemplating the vast stellar distances that lay ahead. The galaxy they had fought to liberate was now truly free, but freedom brought with it the responsibility to extend that gift to others who remained in darkness. Through his bond with Zephyros, he could sense the cosmic currents that would carry them to distant regions where new battles against tyranny awaited. The age of human leadership in galactic affairs had indeed begun, but it was an age defined not by domination, but by the radical idea that all conscious beings deserve the chance to reach their full potential. The cosmos itself seemed to hold its breath as this revolutionary concept prepared to spread beyond the boundaries of a single galaxy, carried by the combined will of beings who had learned that the greatest power lay not in conquest, but in the courage to set others free.